In other words, trees aren't just connected, they're actually sharing resources with each other.
So what we found initially, if one tree had a lot of water in it or a lot of nitrogen or had high photosynthetic rate, and if one tree is sick, then the neighboring tree shuttles more of those nutrients to that suffering tree.
And when you say communicate, do they actually communicate? Like, do they warn each other about like a fire or an invasive species or something?
Yes. So if one tree gets damaged by, say, mountain pine beetle, the injured seedling will up its defense enzymes, and then the receiving tree will then increase its defense enzymes because it knows now that there's some kind of damaging agent around.
Wow. So how are they doing this? Like, how are they communicating through an underground network?
So they're physically connected by these microscopic fungi. And
so mushrooms?
Yes, you're right. We call them hyphae or mycelium. In fact, like if you were to, peel back the surface of the forest floor, you'll see the fungi that are linking these trees together. They're very visible, and it's these white and yellow, different colored threads they look like, sewing threads, but they're fungal threads. And they're crisscrossed and going off in multiple directions. And they work together to create a very complex web. And they're in constant communication between all the.
I think there are pretty dire consequences if we don't ensure that we invest in children and families, particularly children and families in poverty. We can certainly try and pay for these things later on in life, right? But that's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly draining on public resources. It's draining on private resources. And there are so many needs in the community. The more we can focus on children and families early in their development, the better off we'll be in terms of our own public resources, public education, and public health. The other thing that I would recommend is we think about linking the two together, right? We have these systems of health, we have these systems of education, but rarely are the two talking to one another. So in particular in those early years, just before a child is born, and then in through those first 5 years, it's critically important that we invest early on. That way we can make sure that individual is on the right path to start school and to start healthy.
Economists tell us that for every dollar that we invest in a child's life before they turn 6 years old, returns over $7 of community benefit back to all of us. And so what that means for First Five and for our county is that every dollar we're investing, our community is going to reap down the road as this child gets older, as they succeed through school, and as they become productive citizens.
And so early childhood education, particularly if you look at the research, it pays off in the long run. So it's really important for the business community and for the rest of our community to be focused on those aspects of early childhood education, particularly high quality early education, that pay off in the long run. We can pay for it now and invest well into a child's well-being into kindergarten and then beyond. But if you're trying to catch up in third grade, if you're trying to catch up in fifth grade, and then you're trying to catch up in high school or in workforce training, that's going to cost the business community in terms of productivity. That's going to cost the public sector in terms of resources.
A healthy hive of honeybees functions like a perfect and fluid organism. At the center of all activity is the queen. An egg-laying machine, the queen is actually a slave to her duties, laying up to 2,500 eggs a day. As many as 2 million in her lifetime. The worker bees are all female and make up the bulk of the colony. In a typical hive of 30,000 bees, only about 100 are males, called drones. With oversized eyes and bulky bodies, drones are not equipped to gather pollen or nectar and must rely on the workers to feed them. The invaluable work bees do takes its toll. In the summer, workers only live around 30 days, literally worked to death. But the hive is constantly replenished with new generations of bees, ready to go to work from the moment they hatch.
really recommend that everybody take some organization studies courses, even if you're not planning to become an HR specialist. These courses will provide leadership skills. We've got courses such as Hazel Rosen's on leadership development. They're going to give you the interpersonal competencies and skills to advance in your career.
So I think that org studies leave people well poised to go into a number of different careers, be it in the public sector, the private sector, or in nonprofit. I think everyone needs to understand how organizations are structured, how they function, and how people interact in them to get to your strategic goal.
Really important to take organization studies courses, and I know it's a bit of a hard sell for a lot of students who are career-oriented, but over and over alumni come back to me and say, you know what, the most important course I ever took was organization studies, and I really wish I'd taken more, because those are the skills that really helped me move up in my career. So those are the competencies for political skills, for understanding myself, for knowing how to work with difficult people, for knowing how to manage my boss, knowing how to structure the organization, knowing how to create sustainable competitive advantage. And those are the skills that really differentiate the people who are going to have long-term successful careers.
Thank
The primary role for women was still considered to be quote unquote at home, regardless if they had a family or not. Now it's interesting. Even if they didn't have a family, their role was considered to be at home. Women who had the same jobs as men were paid only about 60% of what men made for doing the same work. Now it's interesting. We could say, well, we've made a lot of progress since then. Not a whole lot. It's still around 75% instead of 60% of what men make. Today, it's even as low as about 75%. So there still isn't at least pay equality for women as compared to men. Women still only made up about 21% of the workforce in 1929. There were not that many options for working women. Most women could work jobs like secretaries, nurses, teachers, and social workers. These were typically low-paying jobs. And these jobs are still dominated by women, and they are still lower-paying jobs. Now, some women pushed back, against these restrictions, and they changed their hair, they changed their clothing, and lifestyle choices. They were known as flappers.